Now what I want to do is I just want to take a minute and show you how you can apply some colors to the various elements inside of Bootstrap. We are going to be moving on and seeing how we can create multiple columns, but to make this easier to visualize, I want to add a little bit of color. If you go to Bootstrap and you click on the color area, this is going to give you information about the various colors that you can use within Bootstrap. I'm going to scroll down to the middle section of the page, which has the theme colors. So these are the basic colors that come with Bootstrap. And how we can incorporate these into our projects is, once again, we're just going to simply use classes like we've done in the past. So coming back to our example here, let's say that I want this header section, which contains an H1 and an H2, to appear on a dark background with light text. To do this, I'm going to come into the header and I will add a class, and we're going to add a class of bg-dark. And when we do that, I'm going to want to make the text color light, so I'm going to change the text to text white. If we save now and we refresh, you will see how now this text appears in a dark container and the text is white. In addition to adding text, if we're changing the color, we might want to add some padding to this element. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to add padding. Now by default, the container, which is currently on main, has padding on the right and the left, and that's a 12 pixel padding. What we can use is we can add extra padding and or margin to elements by increasing that value or changing the way that it actually works. And so what I'm going to do is I'm going to come to this header and I'm going to add some additional padding. So I'm going to use P, and if we want to just add padding, let's say to the right and the left, we would put PX, and then if I put -3 and we save this and refresh, you'll see how now I've added padding to this header element. And if I hover over, you can see how some padding has been added in. You can specify the padding all the way around by just using P. So if we change this to P-3, you'll see how now we have padding that is created all the way around this particular element. In this way, we can control the padding. Padding is on the inside. If I added margin, so if I do something and say M-2 and we save and refresh, you can now see how we've added some margin around the entire element. And if you want information on how you can control the margin and the padding in the Bootstrap documentation, you're going to want to go down to the utility classes, and we're going to want to use spacing. And this is going to explain how you can use spacing, which is essentially the margin and padding, and how we can set those particular elements. So you can see M sets the margin, P- sets the padding, and then you can control the individual size by using T for top, B for bottom, S is left, they call it start, and E is right, they call it end. And then as I showed you, we could do X, P-X, which is going to control the left and the right, and P-Y, which is going to control the top and the bottom. And then here are the different sizes that we can use for the various margin and padding types of examples. So that's where I'm getting that information from. I'm just going to click back so we can go back and look at our colors that we were talking about before, and I'll eliminate the margin, but I'll leave the padding all the way around on my example right here, just so that we have a little bit of spacing. The other thing that I want to do here is I actually want to show these articles, which essentially are going to be columns. So I'm going to actually come to body right here. We're going to add a class and we're going to use bg-light. And if we come back to our page and refresh, you'll see how now my page has a very light background. Again, if I used any of the colors that are specified here, you can see here's light. If I change this to primary, let's just say, then the entire web page is going to have a blue background, so we can easily add in those colors. But we'll go ahead and set this to light, and at this point I'm just going to get rid of these classes that I applied to header. We'll just eliminate those, and then I'm going to go ahead and I'm going to make a inline style tag inside my head element, and I'm going to just target all of the articles that I'm using. And let's just indent that just to make it easier to see. But we'll go ahead and we'll make a rule for article. And then I'm just going to set the background color. And we're just going to set the background color to white. So we're going to override the default color. And if we refresh our page, you can see that the background color is this light gray. And now each of these articles has a white background. And this might not be super easy to see because there's not a ton of contrast. So let's also add a border to these elements. So I'm going to come in here and I'm just going to add a border, and we'll go ahead and specify that the border is going to be solid. We'll just make it 1 pixel, and I'll just make this a mid shade of gray, so a little darker gray. And if we refresh now, you can see where my columns are. So this isn't beautiful, but I just want you to be able to see how the columns align as we go ahead and control our columns. I also want to point out that here I'm using the embedded styles to overwrite some of what Bootstrap is applying by default. So you can use your own styles to be able to customize your page if you ever want to. Let's get into our grid. And if we come to the layout section, this will kind of tell you about how grids work. The Bootstrap grid system is based on Flexbox, and it creates a 12 column grid, and it is responsive, and it'll tell you more about this. But essentially, if we want to create 3 columns, we want these articles to appear in 3 columns. And it is worth noting that you can see I have a section that wraps around all 3 articles, and then I have the 3 articles. What I'm going to do in order to create 3 columns is I'm going to apply a class of row to my section. Now I need to tell the individual columns how I want them to appear. I'm going to come into each of my articles, and I'll just hold down my Command or Control key so that I get an insertion point on every single article. And we're going to add a class, and we'll make the class equal to, and we're going to set it to col-lg-4. Because I'm dealing with a 12 column grid, when I say 4, that means that each of these columns is going to take up an equal amount of space. If we save our page and we refresh now, nothing is happening at this size. And that's because I used large. So as I make my page larger, you'll see that once I get to the specified breakpoint, now my articles are going to appear in a 3 column layout. And if we come back here and reference the table that tells us where this stuff is going to happen, large is going to happen when I use col-large. It's going to happen at anything above 992. So if you watch this value right here, and you can see it's 3 columns, and then once I get anything less than 992, it switches to 1 column. If I wanted my 3 columns to occur earlier, then I need to use a different value. So for instance, if we made this small, and once again, let's just change all of these, and we save, and we refresh our page, you're now going to see that I have 3 columns. So the 3 columns are there, and I make my page smaller, 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 and it's going to go all the way down to the small breakpoint, which is at 576. So anything less than 576 is going to give me a 1 column layout. And then as I get larger, it will switch to a 3 column layout. This gives you the basics of how to create columns, and you can see that they are responsive. We will look a little bit more in detail into columns in the next exercise, but I wanted to introduce you to how the grid system works within Bootstrap and showing you how you could create multiple columns.